So we're going to go ahead and get started. Good evening. My name is Keisha Rogers, and today is May 15th. I want to welcome everyone to the third class of our class series on economics and the physical economy that has been led by Ben Denniston and Brian Lance. And they are going to speak momentarily. Brian's going to lead this third series here entitled Basics of Physical Economy. And we'll get into some of the nuts and bolts, should we say, of how only sources of profit is machine tool design. And before I go into that and introduce Brian to give his opening remarks, I wanted to say just a short few things to situate where we are in the political situation and why this class series is so important. We have now witnessed what some might call a political shock, a Pearl Harbor shock that the American people responded to very decisively. Over the past several years, we have witnessed a coup run against our American constitutional republic, against the president of the United States, former President Donald Trump, and against the Constitution and the American people. And what we've seen is what the late great economist Lyndon LaRouche warned of as the end of a party system. And this has become very apparent and very clear in the recent periods, in the recent period where you've had the alignment of the neocon Republican rhinos and the radical environmentalist Democrats. You've had the alignment of what we may call today the children of Satan, as we warned about years ago with the role of the neocons and warmongers, Dick Cheney, and now his daughter, the child of Satan, has been exposed greatly as the type of rhino and Tory faction representing the British Empire that she is. And I want to point to people's attention, and I will put it in the chat here, and we'll make this available otherwise, that an article that was written by Barbara Boyd called Trump Movement Flexes Muscles, Liz Cheney Dethroned as Rhinos Charge into Oblivion. Now, the American people are not going to allow for the rhinos to take us into oblivion with them. So the issue at hand right now is what type of republic and nation will we become? I can tell you now that the fight is on, as said, that we are not in the middle of a Democrat versus Republican, but a Patriots American system versus the Tories. And you see this very apparent when just released today, there's an article discussing that Republicans, Rhino Republicans, Tom Ridge, Charlie Dent, and among 150 rhinos joining with the Nancy Pelosi Democrats are calling for a third party alignment and saying that if the GOP continues to align with former President Donald Trump and his fabricated claims that the 2020 election was stolen, that they are calling to form a third party. Now, they've just signed a call with 150 so-called Republicans that's entitled A Call for American Renewal. Now, I don't know what they're trying to renew to. Seems like they're trying to renew to the British Tory faction against the American system, against the American Republic. And this is what we're here to talk about, because it's one thing that people are waking up to this political shock and saying we are not going to have this. it's another thing that people recognize that we're entering into a different type of shock, which is an economic shock. And the question is, will you be prepared with the solutions to understand how to address this economic shock? And people are continuing to talk about the threats of inflation. And we are entering into a point where we are going to see inflation like we've never seen before. But Lyndon LaRouche warned about this and what to do. And he warned that we had to shut down the Wall Street banking system, the system of the City of London and Wall Street, and the anti American system that that represents, and bring about a solution which he identified going back to 2007 and 2008, which I will post in a video statement, which is now again reposted on our website called The Firewall. And so I want to point that to people's attention. Finally, I think it is important for us to note that the solutions that are being outlined by LaRouche PAC are what is required to restore the principles and concepts of a productive economy. What differentiates our American system as defined by the US Constitution, the preamble to our Constitution, which is the ultimate fight, which has to be waged to bring about a restoring of a Lincoln revolution in the Republican Party. And we've put this forward as an immediately needed platform with the LaRouche Political Action Committee, that requires bringing together an alliance of what we would call the LaRouche, Lincoln, Trump revolution in the Republican Party. And we're going to be talking more about that, because when we look at the devastation of what is happening in our economy, that the solution is not going to be to throw more money at it. It's going to be, how are we going to restore the productive economy? How are we going to put more people to work in productive jobs? How are we going to create a science driver crash program, as we are seeing expressed through the potential of a space program development, which is going to require more advanced creativity from the population. And we're going to be discussing some exciting developments that has happened over the past 24 hours here, and what that means in terms of what direction the world can go in against the direction that has been set forth by the warmongers, the neocons, and the radical environmentalists who want to set mankind back. So with that, I think that gives you an opening sense of what this fight is about now. As said, we've entered into a new period. This fight has escalated, and we have to make sure that the Tory faction of the British Empire does not gain control of our republic. So now let me go ahead and turn it over to Brian, who is going to lead us off in the discussion. And then after he's done, I encourage people to raise your hand and to get in the Q&A by pressing *9. I'll repeat that again once he's done here. Go ahead, Brian, how are you?
Good. Good to be with you, Keisha. And I know Ben's joining us as well, Ben Deniston. And hello to everybody catching this webcast, or this Zoomcast, if you will. And just to mention it, there is an extended question and answer period at the end of my remarks, and Ben may jump in as well, but we'll both be taking questions and answers. And for those that are watching this on YouTube or after the fact, playing it back, you should know that that question and answer is available by subscribing without charge to these webcasts, to these Zoom casts, and that's available on the LaRouche PAC website. So just to mention that quickly. So in the last 2 weeks, the last 2 Saturdays, we've been discussing the fundamentals of LaRouche's physical economy, the science of physical economy, and developing the concepts of not entropy or neg entropy, but Lynn preferred the term not entropy to make clear what he was discussing. The concepts of potential relative population density and increases of energy flux density as measures of economic growth, of real physical economic growth in any economy. And these are principles that go to the heart of the American system of Alexander Hamilton, and as that perspective was carried forward very successfully by Lincoln, McKinley, Roosevelt, renewed under the short presidency of John F. Kennedy, and what's required in even a more profound way today. And we were discussing economic platforms, that is infrastructure, not simply as add-ons, you know, building another road, filling in the potholes, repairing a bridge, but infrastructure in terms of its role in creating an entirely new economic platform. And the history of that, as we've developed as a country, from agrarian to industrialization, particularly you can think of the period around the Lincoln Revolution and the world event held in Philadelphia in 1876, the Great Exhibition there, where Corliss steam engines and all that we were developing were front and center. The steam engine, railroads, and all of that. And of course, then the development and application of electric motors, and then gasoline powered engines. And these revolutions have continued, and each has transformed the entire economy of the United States. And nuclear energy, really still unfulfilled in terms of all of its potential, and the prospect of fusion energy in the near future as a basis, as a singular potential revolution, or the leading edge of a new revolution in the economic platform of the United States, multidimensionally, culturally, as well as economically, scientifically, absolutely at the core. So tonight, I'm taking up the subject of manufacturing, and specifically, and I think it's already linked there on the with this Zoom call, Lynn's paper, "The Return to the Machine Tool Principle," written in 1997, published in 1997, early 1997. So manufacturing, that's what we're going to be discussing tonight. And of course, that's got a long history. I mean, first of all, virtually everything you see and touch on a day-to-day basis, besides your cat or dog or whatever, you know, is something that's been through a manufacturing process. You know, books, you know, the porcelain on your table, you know, your silverware, your flatware, you name it, the building you live in, the roads you drive on, your car, it's all been through a manufacturing process. It's part of a synthetic environment that we develop. That's not negative, that's a positive feature. So first of all, it's just to realize how broad and deep this is in terms of our life, our physical existence and potential well-being. And obviously, if that system does not function, the collapse of US manufacturing over recent decades, a collapse by over a third of our manufacturing workforce since since the 1980s, then the very well-being, continued existence of our society is put at profound risk. And manufacturing, there's over, I mean, at last count I knew, there was 39 categories of manufacturing with the Bureau of Labor Statistics, major categories, everything from handicrafts to, you know, to companies the size of General Motors. And of course, it predates the development of factories. But what we saw beginning, I would date it particularly from the Renaissance. What we saw was the beginning of development of factories and a profounder conception, conscious conception of developing, building out economic platforms. You can take it back to Charlemagne, to the 18th, 19th, or 8th and 9th centuries, of course, but the Renaissances and the cathedral building period following that. But the Renaissance was a unique moment in that, and I'm going to start in terms of some slides here with an example of this, starting with an example which actually this is a model, of course. So this is a model of one of Leonardo da Vinci's projects, manufacturing projects, if you will, which he was an engineer. You get an idea of this. This is a model of a water-powered, think of the Arno River in Florence, but it could be any river. And above it, you can see, above the water wheel there, you can see that the water from that coming down and driving that water wheel, you see above a log being cut with a blade vertically being driven up and down by the turning of that water wheel. Textiles, in this case, timber and lumber, all of these were features, along with locks and dams and so forth, of Leonardo and other key figures. This was about the transformation of society. The Renaissance was not about ideas simply somehow suspended in the clouds, or simply beautiful churches and beautiful architecture, but those beautiful conceptions of man, beautiful conceptions as expressed in those great artistic works, religious works and so forth, was also very much expressed in the development of manufacturing. A point that Lyndon LaRouche emphasizes is that what we see is the emergence of this interdependency between classical humanist modes of education, which we've been discussing, Tony Pappert's class series with Miwa, Steger as well, dealt very directly with the issue of the curriculum, the actual content of classical education, combined with the development under the leadership of the state of infrastructure, economic infrastructure, and the fostering of investments in increasing the productive powers of the workforce through mandatory education, for example. And thirdly, the transmission of discovered principles from experimental science and classical humanist education into products and the processes of production, production. And this is where we come in as the American people. When President Trump emphasized that he was intent on turning the United States into a manufacturing superpower once again, this process is what he was certainly talking about. let's see now how I can move on here to the next slide here. So we're going to take a look at manufacturing, and we're going to look at particular at the machine tool sector. Here we are. We're going to enter a machine tool training center, one that's located here in Houston, and we can see here's machine tools. These are powered machine tools that to use to cut various materials, metal in particular in this case, of different types. You see lathes in the background, drills, and other equipment here. This is the traditional, if you will, machine tools of the last decades, dating back to before World War II. And here we see a modern training center. This is at the University of New Hampshire, a manufacturing center utilizing modern CNC machine tools, computer numerically controlled CNC machine tools, operating at much higher frequencies, much more stable, with rapid turnarounds, utilizing all kinds of additional elements to this process, oils, lubricants, and so on and so forth, to make these processes work. So here, this training is ongoing. It's applications. This is a set of CNC machine tools, probably 3-axis machine tools here in Houston at Houston Community College. Each are what you would find in factories today in industrial processes, manufacturing processes. Students here being trained using a lathe, and you can see they're monitoring measurements being taken electronically to judge the accuracy of the parts being produced. This is just to give you an idea, if you're not already familiar with some of what goes on with machining centers, above working on a motor, an engine block, turning centers, a lathe traditionally, but turning and working on metalworking. Just to give you an idea of this. And now today we have a relatively common feature in terms of machine tools are 5-axis machining and machining centers. If you look on the left, you look at that incredible piece. That's been built out of, shall we say, constructed out of a single block of probably stainless steel, or it could be a more durable alloy, but stainless steel is one possibility. Utilized in aerospace, in jet turbine engines, numbers of other uses as turbines, and other devices. And then on the right, you see again what looks like an engine block, but if you note, it's tilted, and that's part of a 5-axis machine tool. Your table, your rotary table, is also turning, and your headpiece is also able to flex and be directed. Again, this is all CNC now, computer numerically controlled programming, and then transformed into computer CAD CAM, computer machining. Going on to the next, and here is a 5-axis CNC machine tool there at the National Institute of Standards and Technology, which oversees standards throughout this industry and many others. Again, you see the tilted table there. On the left, you see assorted drill bits and so forth. I'm not going to dwell on this in terms of details. I'm just trying to give you an overview. Of course, there's a multitude of materials. All of them require different kinds of machining and drill bits. We now are dealing with nano composite materials, for example, with hypersonics. These require different cutting tools. We're of course dealing with alloys. Material science is a whole area of development. Here we have, just to give you an idea, on the bottom of this schematic, you have the floor of a Mazak iSmart factory. Mazak is one of, if not the leading machine tool producer in the world. One of their iSmart factories is located in Florence, Kentucky. In fact, Jim Bridenstine and the senator from Kentucky, the Democratic senator from Kentucky, just recently in March toured this facility. But on the bottom of this schematic, you see an array of advanced machine tool centers that are all interconnected, you know, by the Internet of Things, as they say, IoT. But above it, you see on the floor above this set of highly automated, robotically enhanced and connected machines, you see above it the control facilities for overseeing these tools as a whole and moving these product from these machine tools from one machine to the next. Just to give you an idea of how advanced this process has become in terms of innovative advanced manufacturing. And this is a look at a Mazak iSmart factory. What you see going down the middle of it there to the left slightly is a track, which is a cart which is moving, automated cart, which is moving product in the process of being machined by various machines, carrying out various steps, moving it automatically from one machine to another. Simultaneously, as required bits for the spindles on these machines for drilling and other purposes can be moved as well from one from machine to machine and from inventory. Again, this is just to get, and of course, here's just pointing out the automation factor, the interconnectedness, the data feeds, and so forth on all of this. And here's again, another feature of this process. Here's robotics in a factory in Leipzig, in Germany, BMW. So, so that's just to give you a sense, a flavor of what's going on in this area. But look, I want to emphasize in the context of this, you know, to dismiss a very pernicious idea that's out there that people don't even think about. You know, it's this idea of you know, it's the so-called three-sector theory. You don't have to memorize that. But you know, it's the idea that that economies have gone from primary, that is extractive processes, to like mining and so on and so forth, to secondary, that is manufacturing, and then into the service economy. And then of course, then you can add on post-industrial after that. And this idea of this so-called evolution is completely, well, it's insane. The progress of mankind depends on the continued development of manufacturing, of our productive process. There's not a point in which we're going into a service economy. Services, even those that of course that are useful, medical, educational, and so forth, as we've developed over the past 2 weeks, are applied and realized through increases in the productive process itself, through increases in the productive power of labor. These machines, CNC machine tools, robotics, and so forth, are tools that, as Leibniz said centuries ago, allow man to multiply 100 times his labor. This is the principle of physical economy. So we can come back to it. There's many features, of course. There's now additive manufacturing, which we've discussed to some degree in the past. And I mentioned the developments in terms of materials and material science, just very briefly. But I want to come then quickly here to LaRouche's, back to this concept that LaRouche was advancing, what he said in terms of what he was getting at, in terms of a return to the machine tool principle. And I hope you can see this on your screen, your screen that was manufactured. And you see at the top, you see the role, first of all, the role of individual creative reason is the source of scientific discoveries. Scientific discoveries, valid properties derived from them, new hypotheses in terms of their implications, potential applications. This leading then into machine tool designs if you're going down the right hand. Left hand, of course, these new hypotheses, discoveries in medicine, in music, in man's view of himself and his role in the world, lead to new creative humanist insights that inform education and the development of the labor force. And those new machine tool designs, not a given machine tool, but constant revolutionary development of new machine tools, 3-axis to 5-axis to additive manufacturing, to laser deposition and so forth. This continued improvement of product designs then leads to the development of new infrastructure platforms, new designs leading into new designs and ultimately into new economic platforms. You can look that over briefly. It's a very useful summary of the process. But what is the outcome? The outcome here is high. If you look at the bottom, increases of relative population density, potential relative population density, and higher levels of development of individual creative reason. That's the outcome. That's the outcome of the machine tool. It starts with new discoveries. It starts with the individual creative reason, and the outcome, the crucial outcome for mankind himself is the development of mankind, in this case, our nation itself. When you abort this process, you send us all into entropy. We're sent downward into a downward spiral, a death spiral, as you may realize. And so this question of manufacturing and making the U.S. a manufacturing superpower is not simply about robots and machine tools and the like. It's about how we utilize them as tools, as levers to advance mankind. So machine tool design, this is the strategic factor. You have a creative discoveries, a principle in nature. You know, you take the science that lay behind the development of the laser, or a simple historical example, starting with Benjamin Franklin's key on a silk thread, you know, discovering the nature of electricity, and what unfolded out of that over decades, over a century or more. Machine tool design is not a mystery. I just put up this cover of a book on machine tool design and numerical control, just to give you an idea. This is an ongoing area of constant work. This is the area of mechanical engineers, for example, one of the areas that they focus on. This is an area that intersects our leading universities in terms of the actual work being done, productive work, quite aside from the basket weaving and macrame and the other gobbledygook. What goes on despite all of that to advance society. So I just wanted to put that up as an example, you know, just to bring that forward. Now, what I want to turn to here, I put this slide up, but I'm gonna come to that in just a second here. Advanced research and development. Where are we now? The United States is still the, or close to the, world leader in research and development, in science and research and development. Our national laboratories, Los Alamos, Livermore, Idaho, on and on. These are leading universities in terms of the, if you will, science and technology aspect. Continue to produce, as well as the private sector, produce growing numbers of patents every year. However, while we continue to lead the world in these developments, we're not finding them utilized in the manufacturing process, not on the scale required. Obviously, the manufacturing sector is shrinking, as I just indicated. I think everyone's aware of it. You can certainly Google some figures from the Bureau of Labor Statistics on manufacturing and get a picture of that, you know, over decades. So what's going on here? NASA is also a very important role in this process. And so one of the things identified here, I want to identify here is something. This is a kind of a reflection of LaRouche's machine tool principle. LaRouche was not talking, you know, out of the top of his hat. His background was in as a management consultant to industry. Okay, so turn here now. Technology readiness. You have a new idea. You start at the bottom and you climb up this ladder. This is a NASA's technology readiness level schematic. You start where? At the bottom. Basic principles observed and reported. Level 2 of TRL. Technology concept and/or application formulated. Level 3, analytical and experimental critical functions and/or characteristic proof of concept, just of the concept. Level 4 is validation in the laboratory, and so forth, on up the ladder. I mean, think of it, you know, human lives depend on every single component that's developed and utilized in our space programs, and you can't screw it up. And so this is not, you know, this is not simply bureaucratic. This is just here as a schematic to give us a sense of literally the steps that NASA goes through, and SpaceX. They've got to meet NASA specs if they're going to take people to the space station, for example, that are required. Okay, that's technology, developing a technology. All right, but there's also the question of manufacturing readiness. There's technology readiness. You have an idea, you develop it, you produce a prototype, and well, that's great. Okay, but is it what about manufacturing readiness? This is a chart. This starts from the top going down. MRL1, basic manufacturing implications identified. And you can take nanoparticles and nanocomposites and say, okay, what are the implications of this? But take it out of the take it out of the Department of Defense context per se, and think about this in the broader sense. manufacturing concepts identified, MRL2 and so forth on down. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. I want you to just get the idea. You have technology readiness, but then there's the question of manufacturing readiness and the steps that have to be taken to accomplish this. Now the effort has been made, and I'm going to date this back to roughly 2012, 2014. An effort has been made to launch what became in 2014 a legislation to create manufacturing innovation in the United States. In other words, the problem here, the fact that our technology, the ideas that we develop, you know, maglev is a classic example, pebble bed nuclear reactors are another, that were developed here, you know, sit on the shelf and get picked up and utilized elsewhere. It's not simply that they get stolen or something. The point is they get bought. The patents get utilized, but they're not realized here. So this problem has been recognized. So back in 2012, 2014, even this is, you know, this is during the Obama administration, right? Nonetheless, Congress passed what was called the Revitalize America Manufacturing and Innovation Act of 2014, a mouthful, but you get the idea. And they set about creating what are now 16 innovation hubs around the country. You know, not necessarily a complete waste around the country. I'll just give you a couple. The National Additive Manufacturing Innovation Institute in Youngstown, Ohio. Another one very interesting is the Next Generation Power Electronics Manufacturing Innovation Institute in Raleigh, North Carolina. NextGen, which is a modular nuclear reactor, which is now being developed, including for space, is in part coming out of that process. So this was not entirely wasted, but the entire budget of these hubs, innovation institutes, as they're now called, but these hubs, which now comes under something called Manufacturing USA, which, you know, is a subset coming under the U.S. government, under National Institute of Standards and Technology, Department of Commerce, and so forth. The total budget is less than $500 million a year, you know, for 16 different institutes. You know, it's tiny. It's a tiny amount of money. And where is the market? Just to briefly, South Korea has promoted clusters around the country. The major chaebol companies like Samsung are encouraged to set up, in conjunction with the government and universities, new clusters that may partner with an additive manufacturing outfit like General Electric in the United States, or some company from Italy or Germany that's developing some new technology, some new technological breakthrough. And they'll bring in small companies, new startups, or they'll spin off new startups. And billions of dollars go into this process very effectively. Here's a measure. This is R&D intensity. And if you look over at the far right, India's on the far right. That's 2015 figures, but nonetheless, you get the idea. Next to it is South Korea. This is the R&D intensity per capita in the economy, an enormous amount, and it's increasing. You can see there, blue is 2000, red is 2017. The investment in research and development that goes on, but it's not only technology, it's in terms of actual application. It's in both categories, as I was just discussing it. So here, what's the takeaway on this? I want to emphasize the takeaway here is to use these tremendous capabilities. Like here's a slide on additive manufacturing, which comes from NASA, but it could be from SpaceX, or it could be from General Electric, or any number of companies that are working in this area. Is the markets. This has been raised again and again, including by the, at that time, the CEO of Intel, back 20 years ago. He emphasized that for every job we were creating in Silicon Valley at the time, we were creating 100 jobs in China, because we were exporting, we were developing these ideas, but then we were saying, hey, let them manufacture it. You know, they can do it cheaper, it's quicker, and then we don't have all the costs of scaling up a prototype, scaling up for manufacturing. It's an expensive process. You know, it's not, oh, you got a nice idea and you make a prototype. Well, turning that into a manufacturing process and developing the supply chains, what we now call supply chains, a bill of materials for that process, labor force, bringing it all together. Hey, give it to them. They can do it. You know, we'll reap the benefits. Very short term. This is, you know, this is what has been warned of again and again. It's not simply that they get the jobs. Think about it. If you're developing new technologies like additive manufacturing here, and you, or it could be a new semiconductor. IBM has just come out with a 2 nanometer sized semiconductor chip, 2 nanometers. I mean, incredible. It'll take them a couple of years to bring it to market. But so you develop these breakthroughs. Well, then you take them. If you're going to manufacture them yourself, that means, or utilize them in the manufacturing process, then they're going to be utilized by real people here, real workers. Men and women are going to get their hands on, if you will, these new advances, which involve new conceptions. And they're going to discover new applications in the process of utilizing. There's going to be, and so you're going to have a proliferation of a follow-on, knock-on, ripple effect coming out of that process of advanced manufacturing. And by shipping these prototypes, so to speak, overseas for manufacturing, we lose out. We lose out in the most fundamental way in terms of the development of our own workforce, the very culture, more profoundly, of our people. So I definitely wanted to emphasize that. If you were looking at this slide and the caption above it, you get the idea. This is the thickness of this nozzle, which you see at the bottom. And then overlaid is just a cutaway of the structure inside that nozzle. The entire thickness is a few pieces of note paper. You know, that could not be built with the 5-axis machine tool. That could only be done through additive manufacturing, building it up layer upon layer, so that those channels are built in to this nozzle as it's built up. Those channels used for cooling. You know, you could run cooling liquids through them and so forth. It's just an example of what we have and the potentials we have. Here's a completely 3D, that is additive manufacturing, printed jet engine, the first one done in conjunction with NASA. Each of those components 3D printed. General Electric on its LEAP engines for jet engines now produces its fuel nozzle with additive manufacturing, has been for years. What would have been 4 or 5 pieces is now a single piece. It's 75% stronger, it's 25% lighter. You know, this is the kind of wherewithal which we've got to bring increasingly into application. We've got to grow our labor force. To do that, we've got to create the demand. To come back to my point I was beginning to make a moment ago, we've got to create the demand, effective demand, where in making the investment to scale up patents, breakthroughs, and so forth, is worthwhile. This requires national credit. It requires Lynn's 4 laws, beginning, as Keisha mentioned earlier, in terms of a reorganization of the bankrupt global monetary, Anglo-American, British financial system, starting with Glass-Steagall, and then national credit, and through national banking, providing credits for large-scale infrastructure projects. Large-scale infrastructure projects over 20 years, 30 years. These projects will create continued demand for manufactured goods. They create markets which aren't there now for those goods. And it becomes a self-feeding, self-perpetuating process of growth, of not entropic growth, negentropic growth. The 4th law that LaRouche developed is in terms of fusion. And here's the cover of the, I'm coming to the conclusion of my remarks here. This is the fusion, that report of the National Academy of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine. They just came out with this in February of this year, bringing fusion to the US grid. There's elements of that are problematic. They promote it from the standpoint that there's now a decision to go with renewables, to move out of fossil fuels and so forth. And so the argument is, if we can get fusion online by 2035, 2040, with initial power to the grid, a 50 megawatt or larger initial pilot reactor, then fusion can begin to play a critical role in this transition out of so-called fossil fuels, CO2 producing fuels. I mean, we ourselves, of course, we know this is nuts, but they're operating in a certain environment. So here you have the leading scientists from around the United States, and in the report, which is available online for a free download. It's again attached here to this webcast, or will be before the end of the webcast. You can thumb through it and begin looking at it yourself. It's about a 50-page report, summary report, but it gives you a flavor of it. They brought in utilities, universities. In other words, how do we commercialize fusion, and how do we do it rapidly? This is a science driver approach. As with Trump's Project Artemis, to go to the moon and Mars and beyond. These are science driver projects which we have to multiply across the United States. This is just from the bringing fusion to the grid report. Grid means bringing to the power grid, actually bringing power online from fusion energy by 2035, 2040. And you see here the steps, the phases of operation, as they say. I'm not going to dwell on this. This is just included in the report. But starting with the formation of 3 or 4 national teams, moving forward on roughly parallel tracks, but different, taking advantage of already known technologies in plasma research, material science, and so forth, and how, which of these tracks will pay off first. In a certain sense, like Operation Warp Speed in terms of the development of vaccines. You pursue parallel tracks and you fund them. The whole idea is to get a pilot fusion reactor online for a cost of no more than $6 billion, and one that's scalable up for commercial utilization. The next slide. Now, again, I'm not going to go through this in detail, but here you have elements, various activities in support of the development of fusion power plants. And you see it: organizational, technology approach, siting, public-private partnerships. This is all being worked out with sets at Floor Corporation, Bechtel, other corporations were brought in designing this perspective. And then down at the bottom, towards the bottom, halfway down, workforce development, plasma performance, actuators, heat exhaust, tritium fuel cycle, blanket, that's the blanket that captures neutrons coming off a tritium deuterium fuel cycle. It doesn't have to be that fuel cycle, but if you use that fuel cycle for starters, you got to develop blankets to capture those neutrons. And so now what's my point? My point is all of this is going to require a multiplication of new breakthroughs in technologies, new breakthroughs in fundamental science, in nuclear science, beyond what already has been accomplished. And this is going to multiply the productive capabilities and the optimistic outlook of our people, of the American people, to carry this and advance this process forward. And this is an example of again, the potentials out there that are right in front of us. So I just want to end with a nod to a very important concept, the concept of full set economies. We have to develop again a full set economy that can take ideas, take creative, scientific, and cultural ideas and carry them all the way through the productive process to advancing the creativity and development of our own people. Every nation needs an approximation of a full set economy that can ensure its own sovereignty and durable survival. It's from the standpoint of developing full set economies. China is developing a full set economy. Russia is developing a full set economy. Point is, we have to develop, it's the United States as a powerful force for good in the world, as a full set economy, in collaboration with other such nations aspiring to the same, that we can progress as mankind. And this has to be the content, really, of LaRouche's New Bretton Woods, of a new reorganization of the financial system led by our nation, in conjunction with the other leading powers, Russia, China, and India, and of course with other nations coming in, Japan, and so on and so forth. That process is absolutely critical. This book by Seike Mitsuhiro, Beyond the Full Set Industrial Structure, which is still available on through the booksellers. Short, small little book, details what the process of Japan's development of a full set economy, and then what happened after the Plaza Accords in 1985, when the dollar was devalued and the Japanese economy internally was wrecked. That's another story. But as a result of that, you have companies like Mazak that's now around the entire globe. With the up value of the Japanese yen, Japanese industry moved out of Japan into China, even on a larger scale than before, into Europe, into the United States. You know, think of Honda and Toyota plants in the United States. Think of Hyundai, BMW plants in the United States. These they went outside with their productive capabilities, their machine tool capabilities, and robotics and the rest. But a full set economy is what we have to return to. Japan and other nations require for the development of our own nation, of our own people, our own culture. And I think I'll stop there. I think that is it hopefully it will be useful for everyone, useful for discussion, and gets at this question of the economic platforms and the process whereby we go from ideas into production, into outcomes. So thank you for your attention.
Great. Thank you, Brian. Very exciting. Lots. Okay. Let's see here. I have a few questions that have already come in. Thank you. From the queue. And before I get to those questions, hi, Ben. I wanted to just find out if Ben had anything at the moment he wanted to add to the discussion before we go to the questions that are coming in.
No, I thought that was great. I mean, I think it just underscore the fact this is what we need to do. I mean, what has been laid out from Trump about making the United States a manufacturing superpower again, you know, Brian just gave us a good insight into what that means. And, you know, this is the anti-globalization, anti-globalist perspective, right? As opposed to this crazy system where, you know, we're exploiting cheap manufacturing, cheap labor for the physical goods we rely on, and we have a deindustrialized, you know, depressed economy that doesn't actually do anything. You know, the alternative is what Brian laid out here, with full set economies all moving towards advanced production capabilities and collaborating in that direction. So I think it's a really important and incredibly timely issue that Brian's putting on the table here. So I think we should jump into it and see what people think.